Hola, buenas noches. Muchas gracias a todos y a todas por venir a una nueva actividad del Centro de Estudios de Arquitectura Contemporánea de la Escuela de Arquitectura y Estudios Urbanos de la Universidad de Columbia GSAPP. Antes que nada, como hoy somos un montón, me gustaría avisarles que si tienen algún amigo o colega viniendo a la conferencia que no encuentra lugar, en el aula 204 se va a retrotransmitir la conferencia en vivo, obviamente. Después capaz pueden acercarse para el final de la charla, pero bueno, si alguien no está cómodo o en algún momento prefiere ir ahí y verla estilo cine, más tranquilo, también va a estar disponible eso. Bueno, dado que somos muchos hoy, me imagino que hay algunas caras nuevas, queríamos compartirles un poco de información complementaria del SEAC. El SEAC es la plataforma de discusión y análisis del estado de arte de la arquitectura contemporánea de esta escuela, a través de conferencias, seminarios, mesas redondas y talleres. Desde 1997, el SEAC es un punto de encuentro abierto, público y en general en casi todas sus actividades gratuito para alumnos y profesores de la escuela, para estudiantes y también para un público externo, no solo presencial, sino también a través de nuestros canales de difusión de YouTube y redes y demás. Bueno, en los últimos años, a través de una curaduría activa y dinámica, buscamos nuclear invitados locales, tanto de la escuela como de la región, como invitados regionales, como es hoy el caso. Como siempre, encuentran la programación del SEAC en los accesos al auditorio, se pueden llevar un póster. Hoy ya estamos llegando casi al final de la programación. Para todos aquellos que no puedan venir a alguno de los eventos o no hayan estado o estén conociendo alguna de las actividades hoy, estos están disponibles en el canal de YouTube, como la estupenda conferencia de Thomas Fernando al inicio de este semestre. Para los que llegan y no encuentran lugar, hay un aula complementaria donde se va a retransmitir, y si no, un poco acá en el piso es lo mejor que tenemos para ofrecerles. Se ve bastante bien acá adelante en el piso, más que en los cuadrados. Bueno, continuando con los avisos parroquiales, también aprovecho que hoy somos muchos para volver a invitarlos a la exhibición Recuerdos del Futuro, Arquitectura Argentina de los años 70, que se encuentra en el taller de arquitectura. Hoy creo que vamos a terminar un poco tarde, pero anotándose a través de la página de internet pueden acceder al campus y visitar esta exhibición que presenta una serie de documentos originales y en mayor medida inéditos de una serie de edificios producidos en esta época. La exhibición fue curada por profesores de la escuela, por Gonzalo Sherry y Faiden, quienes también editaron esta publicación, la segunda publicación de DTA Arquitectura, que se encuentra disponible en el shop DTA, así que ponen en Google DTA Arquitectura Argentina y pueden ver esta publicación. La publicación funciona un poco como un catálogo de la muestra, se retroalimentan. La muestra es para ver los documentos más en grande y el libro es para después llevarse a casa los textos y quedarse con un poco de esto que va a durar solo un mes. También aprovecho para comentarles que está disponible la reedición de la Guía de Arquitectura Práctica Buenos Aires 1925-2025, dictada por el director de la carrera, Ricardo Fernández Rojas. Esta guía que presentamos a principios de año y que estuvo agotada durante varios meses, ya está disponible online en librerías. Es una guía que creo que reúne donde está Juan, más de 200 edificios, publicados con sus documentos originales de publicación, así que es una zambullida a Buenos Aires, pero también a Buenos Aires a través del tiempo, muy recomendada. Todas estas publicaciones están disponibles afuera en un stand del shop Tela para quienes quieran. Bueno, y último anuncio es que nuestra última actividad pública del SEAC será el próximo lunes con la conferencia de X, el arquitecto belga, socio de la oficina mexicana productora y del espacio de exhibición Liga. Bueno, y ahora, para no seguir demorando, me gustaría pasar inglés, darle la bienvenida a Kersten. Kersten, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a great honor to have you in the school. I think I'm not the only one that feels like this, given this full auditorium. Before handing the microphone to Marcelo for a proper comment, I wanted to make a formal introduction. Kersten Geers is an architect by the University of Gante and by the Escuela Técnica Superior de Arquitectura de Madrid. He has founded, alongside David Van Severen, the architecture firm Office, Kersten Geers, David Van Severen, in Brussels, Belgium. He founded the office, I think, in 2002. Office has received numerous awards in this more than 20 years lifespan, from which we can highlight the Silver Lion at the Venice Biennale, the Aga Khan Architecture Award, and the Architecture Award from Belgium. Geers has been a teacher in many universities around the world. He's now an ordinary teacher at Mendrisio in Switzerland, but he has also taught at the Berlage Institute, at Columbia, at Yale, at Harvard GSD, where he held the Kenzo chair, at EPFL, among many others. Geers is also an author and an editor. He was one of the founding partners of the San Rocco magazine. Pier Paolo Tamburelli was here a couple of weeks ago, and he briefly discussed the magazine, so we are among the same ideas this week here at the school. And he's also an author of other books by himself, such as Without Content, that is available in Spanish, edited by Moisés Puente, como Sin Contenido, o Arquitectura Sin Contenido. He has also written Excess of Architecture and Experiments in Thickness. For giving the microphone to Dean, I want to thank Enrique Walker and also a lot to Marcelo, because they were the ones that helped convince you to accept our invitation to come here. So we attacked from many different ways. The architecture that Office has produced and the books you have edited and written, I think, are very important for the school. They came in a moment where architecture was going in another direction. I don't know exactly which one, but you managed to produce documents that were complex yet straightforward. They were serious yet fun. They were innovative, but at the same time very rooted in architecture. So thank you for giving that back to us. So Marcelo, I invite you to introduce Kersten. Gracias.
Buenas noches a todos. I promise to be brief, okay? So I have to say, or if I have to describe Kersten and his work and these few days in Buenos Aires, maybe the way to call him, it's like a natural force, I have to say, because I mean all the work, I mean all the energy that he and David mobilize to do what they do requires an amount of power that I have to say it's very difficult to have and to produce, and that was the thing that I saw these few days together in Buenos Aires. But I would like to focus not in quality, because this auditorium speaks itself about that. Nobody will be seated in the floor if it has any doubt about the quality of what we are about to say. And I would like to focus in a thing that is not a typical thing, that quantity. For me, it's I believe that quantity is very important because it creates a way of being an architect. You know, it's a totally different sport. Let's call it like that. Just a fact. I think that for long, office is the most prolific practice of our generation. It's a fact. It's not an opinion. And through these more than 22 years, they managed to produce more or less 60 buildings, which is a lot. But for me, it's very important to say that they are also prolific in scale and diversity. It's not like doing 60 housing buildings. They don't, for the moment, like housing, of course, but they did also schools, libraries, media centers, and I'm talking plural, not so bad houses, crematoriums, bridges, pieces of furniture, cities. They started almost with a city, the one in Korea, I mean, together with Dogma. Office buildings, industrial buildings, art installation. So what that means that they are architects that are dealing with contingency. They are strongly related to the world, and to do all this kind of work, they have to develop some skills. And those skills can be understood by knowing another fact, that they have done like 40 academic publications. I took my time to count it, and then it's a lot, 60 buildings, 40 books. So that means that they have the big repertoire of design technique that I know, and they can administrate that with. They administrate an enormous amount of knowledge. And it's and I love to see architecture through them. I mean, from my perspective, office activates your private constellations. I love to see when they come next to my planets. We've been discussing this all days, but also I had a few discussions with colleagues, and what is funny that everybody mentioned every different architect talking about the same office. So what I think that in all these publications, they study the work of dozens of architects, bringing them to the present, and to operate with them, not with nostalgia, not with celebration, but to make them active. Asking every time which perspective do they make sense now? From which angle should we look back to them to renovate their means in the discipline, and forcing the architecture or the discipline of architecture to be relevant and active. So for me, this is like the most easy way to insist one more time. Sorry, because I'll kind of repeat myself. But this is a way of being an architect, like mixing these two apparently different words. And now we are going to listen to one of the best, maybe, one of the best, let's say, architects that are doing that. So please, everybody, welcome me to.
Can imagine that the pressure is very high now. You hear me? Yeah. Good. Yeah, pointer. That's the pointer. So, well, first of all, Marcelo, thank you very much. And you and Sebastian mean as much to us as apparently to you. I mean, I think it's mutual. I think the school here should also realize which marvelous architects they have running the place. I think it's really special. I had also the luck, apart from seeing a couple of very interesting, very beautiful buildings here in Buenos Aires, to also see quite a lot of your work in the last days, and that was, absolutely fantastic experience. So thank you for that. Thank you very much, and also thank you, Javier, because the energy with which you do that, even in Spanish, which I half understand. And you sell books also, of course. So buy the book. No, but really, it's truly special. So, to be here in this place, it was a long time overdue. It was something which we discussed for a couple of years, and it never quite happened. It was too complicated with teaching in the States, and since this semester I'm not there, I was so happy that it could come. So anyways, Well, there's two aspects of this presentation. First of all, it's very long, so I really apologize. So if you're really bored and you kind of have bad back, you can absolutely walk out. I will not take it personal. That's okay. And then, voila. I mean, I hope I still remember what I'm going to talk about, because Javier already took my presentation at midday, so I do not exactly remember what's in there. But we will figure it out. And maybe before I start, Enrique, it was mentioned. I think Enrique has been very important for me throughout many years. It's a pity he had to just leave because, he's not so native Chilean was calling. So I hope he's back for you very, very soon. So, hold on. Is that working if I press this? Yes, that's us. So, this is a lecture in two parts. The first part is a kind of, I would call it a little bit of maybe a bit of a reminder where we started, some elements which were on the table. I thought it was relevant somehow here. I was never here before, so and then I have the feeling that somehow maybe we have to share a few elementary things. And then somewhere after the first 40 slides, there's a title, which is the title of the lecture, and then we actually start the lecture. So we're in pre-lecture mode. So pre-lecture mode is just sharing a few ideas which were important for us from the very beginning. And you see the numbering is actually the numbers of office projects. And in the beginning, you'll see this. There's very few slides for each of these. But I thought it was important to say that when we were working on architecture from the very beginning, it's not the first part. You see it's somehow project number 15. I think from the very beginning, we were very interested in to what extent when you do architecture, you are somewhat negotiating an inside and outside. And of course, no place so extreme as this place, in a sense, which was a project we won years ago for a border crossing. Of course, never finally done in many ways. It was also not the plan. I suppose we were naive when we did the competition. Actually, we won it, funny enough. It's no more than a border crossing for pedestrians. You walk in, you are controlled, you probably quite easily leave the country. It was between Mexico and the States. And then, of course, you have to wait and hope to actually cross the border and go to the other side. I mean, the typology as it really exists is, of course, you know this very well, is these bridges over the fence, and then people are waiting in the sun in these bridges. This, of course, a long time ago, we made this project about 20 years ago, but it was important because, in a sense, it investigate what happens if you do not necessarily change the condition of what happens. I mean, it's still border crossing, still people are controlled, still many nasty things happen. But by turning, in a way, this very spot in between into a space and walling the space with a wall bigger than the actual fence, you do this kind of détournement. So it was an investigation in architecture simply as in its raw power, which is it is unable to do an amount of things, but is also able to change fundamentally the condition in which you're living through this very sequence of things. You see that here. Second project, I mean, is somehow within the same logic, but it's not so much a wall, it's kind of a wall as a building, which is a project, now we're back to Europe, it's North Africa, it's a place called Ceuta, which is in fact Spanish, but it's in Morocco, and there in a project about cities in Europe, and we decided to make this project to see whether, in a way, again materializing an aspect of what's going on, an aspect which is extremely, say, political, that architecture somewhat was able to clarify. I mean, so this project called Cité de Refuge was somehow presented as a city-state on the other side of the Mediterranean, in the thought, of course, that it was in the tradition of these 40,000 inhabitant-like city-states one would find around the Mediterranean in Greek and Roman times. And by incorporating the idea of harbor, or the idea of kind of water and edge, I mean, it would internalize the very problem, of course, of Fortress Europe. Can you or can you not, be allowed to enter our heavily protected welfare state? So, I mean, this project was I guess, very important for us in the time. It coincided very much. Actually, it's a little bit earlier than what became these San Rocco axonometrics in a sense, but also we did not invent them. Of course, they go back to 1970s and 80s drawings. And we were really not just only investigating, say, what architecture could do, but perhaps also, and you see that, what a simple set of things, plan, section, axo, two perspectives, was able to tell. So you see that here and here. A third project, but moving towards a certain sense of reality, is what we did in the Venice Biennial in 2008. In fact, we were then invited to the Belgian Pavilion, which is that building here. And the Belgian Pavilion, well, you know, it's not a particularly interesting building. It's one of the oldest one on the Giardini. It has been transformed in the 1920s, 30s. I think it was built in the 1910s. Actually, 1907, I now realize. And so, at the same time, in this kind of central plan, kind of velum, light from the top, it stands, you know, in the sequence of pavilions. And we wanted to somehow, I mean, the project was called After the Party. So imagine we're 2008. I could say in 2008 was 1 year after 2007, so 100 years of pavilion. So after the celebration of 100 years of that pavilion, but that didn't interest us that much. What interested us more was like, if you go back to 2008, in some way we felt that the architecture discourse was hijacked by some sort of neo-journalism. You know, it was a time, I think, when Colas was going to all kinds of African and countries in order to document what was there without doing much about it. And we felt architecture needed to go back to a much more, I would say, fundamental idea, which was investigating what architecture does. So making something disappear, making inside and outside, making a building as a box or as a garden or maybe as a court in some sense. So here what happened is by building this wall around the pavilion, so to speak, the pavilion disappeared. And then when you actually would walk through that wall somewhere, you enter the pavilion from its interior, where we had taken off the velum from the top light. All the light inside and outside would be the same. And then on the floor was confetti everywhere. So you see that here, I think. So here you see a section of this. You see that pavilion as it appeared. I mean, so for people who hadn't been to the Biennale recently, they probably didn't realize there was no Belgian pavilion. I mean, they thought that was probably a pavilion somewhere. And then you would enter it, you get the ramp in between, and then this was what happened inside. So there was only this, and this was the garden. So these kind of elements were there and were not always per se so clearly defined in their performance. I think for us it was much more an investigation. I mean, okay, one could talk, but that's not the scope of the lecture about this. This is scaffolding, this is perforated, galvanized panel. I mean, you know, the materiality and how you use a floor panel as a wall panel is interesting too. But here I would like to just keep it as a set of, I would say, markers, a few flags to explain an interest, which became, I would say, the driver in many ways to what we did in the office. So if I move, and I move all the time more, I say, to the real, if I could call it like that, then with these thoughts, with these elements, we made a couple of very early houses. So one of the first houses we done was this, what we called a weekend house, which was this house. It's a house of 4 rooms, 9 by 9 meters, and the rooms are in a way in sequence in the backyard of the existing house, which had a set of outbuildings which we demolished, the house we kept, and we somehow maneuvered the readings thus that this became the house, 2 gardens and a central house, or a house, a garden, a house, a garden. You see that because of the moves, but also that this becomes, this main house of the street becomes somehow a secondary house, which was the guest house of that weekend house. So also, of course, it was about to what extent materializing a desire. We thought it was a rather crazy idea to find that you would want a weekend house in a place called Merchtem in Belgium, not so far from Brussels, which we thought being totally dreadful and sad and depressing. But maybe by the simple gesture of cutting yourself loose from the very context and somehow celebrating that kind of, I would say, vibe of this connection would again prove how architecture, and here, I mean, you see that literally, so that's the house with the roof here open. It moved, I think we saw that in the section, so that it moved somehow. That architecture was able somehow to make some sort of escape. So, I mean, of course, again, the house has many thoughts. I mean, that dimension here is the same as the two side dimensions. There are kind of big sliding windows. The sliding windows disappear. The frame is never there, so it's open or closed. So there's also a thought of, in a way, building the house from the sequence of rooms from the interior. So there's always rooms parked against each other. You see that here. So which then, of course, solve all these windows and these doors. So to the point that when you approach the house from the street, that you come to the back of the walls. But okay, so these elements there, this kind of fiction, enhanced with this strange pool in the middle next to what is the bathroom here, and in a way looking for the direct confrontation between inside and outside. So pushing this forward to this house, which was actually built more or less the same way. The number is a bit earlier, but I think we took a bit longer. This house is a house which is a detached house. The plot is here. The house is in the middle. Why is it in the middle? We wanted to move it as much to the center of the loft as we could. We made two, in a way, courts, two included gardens to the house. We use this kind of, I guess that's in most places, so you cannot build really on the edge of the plot. We needed 4 meters. We use 4 meters, but we use it also in a way as a way to enter that figure. And we asked ourselves again by redefining the elements at play: is it possible? Is there a way to in a way make even suburban housing, give it a sliver of responsibility? Giving back in a way the sides, I mean, in order to kind of protect or take a distance from the neighbor, but also by doing that, somehow giving back or kind of making somehow more collective that part of the garden, but of course for your own gain. The house itself is an exercise in rooms here 4x4, enfilade, mineral in terms of cinder block, the structure below, and wood on the top, almost like a kind of a simple rectangular roof. And then here you see the section, and indeed these boards are included in the figure of the fence. So the fence and the house coincide, so hence the fence of the neighbor is always at a distance. So here you see that. I mean, it's a long time ago I showed these pictures, but it's funny. It's funny to kind of start with these elements as some kind of beginning of an idea. So I guess the last house I included is very different, but I think, and it's important, you can see it in this lineage, in that when perhaps a whole set of projects, especially the first 5-7 years, were investigating proximity and how to a certain extent that proximity was negotiated with entrepreneurs and sameness. There are, of course, spaces which are quickly not related. I mean, I didn't talk much about this, but the way these rooms are all the same. There's no functional relationship. It's a kitchen. It's a dining space. It's a bedroom. It's whatever. It's a bathroom. And all these rooms, everything happens, but essentially they're always somehow, at least in plan, in dimension, the same. So here, that sameness was a big theme, but also the proximity, like how, if you're all so close, as you can see here, can these perimeters negotiate. In the last intro house here in Spain, the solo house, of course, you could say many of the same topics, but always put in the reverse are at play. So here in a very, very lush site, I mean, actually a part of agricultural land bought by somebody who intelligently bought all this land just next to a national park. So to a certain extent, your land and the whole park seem to be yours. So there's this kind of mise en scène, this sensation of being alone in nature. And for us, of course, the most interesting thing was that, you have this kind of, I would say, prototypical architectural kind of dream, the building on the rock or something like that, which, of course, in a way is only interesting if you understand it as a metropolitan problem, as a problem of, in a way, inhabiting a space which is very, at least a space which still pretends to be wild, but is there such a thing as wilderness? And while doing that, of course, any gesture you do, in a way, destroys that very space. So you have a kind of weird negotiation. Plus, it allows you to kind of bring this idea of cohabitation in a gesture of distance. So here, as opposed to these rooms very close to one another and off down, things are pushed out. There's a kind of big ring, it's 45 feet in diameter. There's these cuts, as you can see. There's actually a curtain, a kind of stiff curtain, which kind of closes and opens each of these things. You see that here a little bit. And then, as opposed to houses made out of walls, here you have only, in a way, furniture. Furniture, both on the, say, ground floor. I mean, like, say, here there's some kind of big shelf, which at the same time kind of is the back of the bed or something like that. But also furniture on top of the roof, which is all these big objects which contain the water, are part of the machinery, because of course this house somewhere lost in the middle of nowhere is autonomous. So all the machines which make that autonomy work are kind of brought in as some sort of sculpture. So here you see that, see the house, you see kind of an object there, kind of water volume, water contained, painted by picture formation artists we sometimes work with, and in here you see one of these strange moments. To close, but only the first part, I'm sorry. To close, you see here this, in a way, this insanity to a certain extent, and it's also, I believe, interesting about architecture, so that you have all these elements which are ultimately all informal, that are of course dealing with the kind of notion of mechanical. So you have a kind of, and it came back in our architecture often since, I believe. So I think there's a serious and I think also necessary desire, even responsibility, to simplify architecture to the point that machines are almost absent. But at the same time, of course, sometimes these machines are there. And how do you deal with these then? And so here this box and the container are there on the one hand. At the same time, it's of course a house that when weather allows it, you just open everything and you're in the middle of nature. Good, but that was the intro. The lecture starts now. The big house in the large city. The big house in the large city, well, on the one hand, you could connect it with what you just saw, but no, we are not going to see houses anymore. That was the last house you saw, more or less. I think the big house in the large city, and of course, then I do not know the context in Argentina well enough. I mean, I'm learning to what extent it's applicable here, but I did drive yesterday together with Enrique and Sebastian to La Plata, and then you do start to see, I think, conditions which are slightly different here in the center of Buenos Aires, but where everything is somehow city and nothing is somehow very dense, and certainly in Europe this is I would say the typical condition. We used to call it, in an edition of San Rocco, the even covered field. We have been working in various occasions in school in Grigio and Lausanne on topics similar to that, which of course are all versions of sprawl or city sprawl, sure. But what I somehow like in the idea of large city is that, I mean, rather than, how to say, leaving it for what it is and not seeking for any responsibility, I think it's simply trying to redefine city as something slightly different from what we wanted it to be. I mean, of course, we had attempts in the past, things of Project City and stuff like that. But the point really is if we are dealing with a city which is not anymore very much concentrated or not very concentrated, it's very much the condition in which we are working now. And it's true, we've been making books in the past, say, on the schools of Aldo Rossi or stuff like that. And then you realize that also in the 70s, although Rossi writing Arquitectura della città, Architecture of the City, that ultimately the buildings he was building were small schools and public buildings in places which were hardly worth the term. So I think this ambivalence, the idea that we have to try to figure out how cityness, and with cityness I think there's an idea of citizenship, is still possible, and to what extent also the architectural project, I mean the building you build, contributes to that. I think that's what I try to do here. Now the lecture, as you will see, is probably things, and maybe will then also emphasize that, projects where I would say we are clearly there, this is it, this is what we want, and there's also projects which of course for the sake of the lecture I just threw them all in because I wanted to add more projects, I don't know. I mean, either way, I mean, we'll figure it out. Just to say, the big house, no, I should say this too. for me, the big house, what I like about the notion of big house is that it goes back to, at least in Central European terms, in the notion that in the old villages, the doctor or a person of a certain kind of public position was simply inhabiting the larger house of the village. So that the whole idea that a public building should be by definition, representative in the classicist urban sense, that it used to be columns and nowadays it's transparencies and I don't know what, that it perhaps a bad idea if you understand that everything is city and everything is a little bit not city. So is there an idea of a public building, so to speak, which deals with size, with scale, but does not necessarily embrace all the evident and often very banal tropes of publicness as we have to deal with it. So let me try to be a little bit more clear. So partly the reason why this whole thing came about for us, without consciously maybe talking in these terms, is that a few years ago we were working in Bahrain and we were making two what we then started to call dars. Now the word dar is a confusing term because dar is actually the Arabic word for house, and they're not houses. So now this is an idea of context. So one of the dars, and it's one which we seldomly show, the one here, because we always show the other one. And there's a simple reason for that, because Bas Prinsen, who took all the pictures which I show here, he went to visit Bahrain, and then only one was finished and the other one was not. But then he went back and now pictures of the other one. So I kind of think it's interesting to show the other one. And the other one, in a sense, is more interestingly positioned and in a way also more explicit in its design. It's the smaller of the two. It's here, as I said, and this is an old Arabic village which is called Rifat. And you zoom in, and in a way you see that there's very little real structure. I mean, there used to be houses 1 floor high, and they changed the urbanistic rules over time, and nowadays one can build 10 meters. And 10 meters high, that you can see here somewhere, that means that many of these very old houses have been replaced by buildings somehow 10 meters high. So they squeeze in 3 or 4 floors, and they are there. And they're all there in a kind of context which is half mineral, not so mineral. Interesting. We got involved in this project. Why? Because the Ministry of Culture had bought an amount of small houses. And these houses, they were used by groups of men, they were always men, who long time ago, they were making this kind of improvised music, you could say, and the music was related to pearl fishing. And pearl fishing was you go for on a boat for weeks, and then during the off time or time on the boat, in order to keep the spirits would be alive, like you can see there here, and they would make this music, clapping, hitting objects, pots, stuff like that. Now pearl fishing, since of course they found oil in Bahrain, is long gone. This tradition, which is a very ephemeral tradition, became something of an idea of father to son, so as I said, men only, and they were doing that still in some of these houses. So the fear was here really that, and that's that house, so to speak, that not only these houses would disappear, but also that tradition would disappear. So they bought the houses, they thought we need to renovate the houses, and we also maybe need to add more public thought to it. I mean, this was related to a later project, which was the Pearl Path, and at the Pearl Path came, in a way, this whole heritage from UNESCO and so forth. But there, in its core, the project and the question was very simple. Can you transform or renovate that house, clean it, and maybe add something? Perhaps the idea was initially in the question, add something on top or something like that, so that it could become more public, so that ephemeral culture would be more visible. So here you see the plan of the house, already in a way renovated, you could say, simplified way, because we had a wall in here which was historically not there. And the proposal we did was to renovate the house, to clean it up, and to build a little building next to it. So the building next to it is, as you can imagine, 10 meters high, maximum, as you can do it. Takes the last spot here somehow squeezed on this kind of non-existing roads. The house is a set of rooms, and perhaps the real original reason why they ever thought of us to do this project, I guess. We added some toilets and a little kitchen, as you can see, but we vehemently did not want to open that house, because these houses, in their tradition, it's a private affair. They do that in these very strange, narrow rooms, which have only to do with structure. Basically, the mangrove kind of tree trunks are just a certain length, so they could make a certain span. Hence, they use the space in a certain way. So that's interesting. So that in a way, form, in a way, pushes function in some sense more than anything else. So we proposed to build a small stack of rooms, 3 rooms on top of each other, next to this, in which we said, as opposed to the house, this is the measurements. Now, today, of course, I would say, next to the house, we make the big house. So the big house, in that sense, is nothing more than, a set of rooms, a threshold, you can see it, threshold, something which you can completely close. It's protected against the sun when in the mid-season somehow still allows to not use mechanics. It's on the closest possible distance to the actual private house where they still meet and play. But when they do it here, it becomes a public affair. So there's a direct connection to it, you can see. So here you see the models. Here you see all kind of ideas and references. There's here and there you will see another kind of back. And then here you see the set of rooms. The rooms are simply for what they are, and around them, these blue boxes that you will see are all the installations. And also, maybe important to mention, the columns are either just columns or are ducts. So the kind of open circles here are the ducts, and the black are the real columns. So you have, in a way, here you see it, a small house. Here you have actually a house, a big house, I should say. You have it here in context. You have here when this kind of curtain opens, so to speak, and you could open the whole thing, and it becomes to sort of a public or a collective affair. So here, I would say the first big house. Big, of course, in that it's not very big, but that it's bigger than what there is, and in its so-called bigness, if I could call it like this, it attempts for some sort of, I would say, public exchange. So here you see that. You see here you will have the threshold to the actual house, which was renovated, and here you see that again. So the big house. So where in Bahrain, of course, I mean, it came about in some kind of weird fashion, and I would have perhaps never thought 10 years ago that it would be part of an argument like this. I do still think that exactly because it somehow updates the dar into a house and from house to a big house, and it's the antecedent of this, which is a very different project. We're Belgium, we're library, we're another idea of big city. I mean, this is one of the richest cities in Belgium. It's next to Ghent. There is hardly a city. It's called St. Martinslaten. I mean, all the rich people close to Ghent move here, and they move over this kind of big villas. So, big is of course relative, but I mean, fairly big. And all these villas are, in a way, big houses. They're enormous, but they have all a pitched roof because the idea is, of course, that they're in a more or less natural environment, and hence there's a kind of an idea of a more or less consensus on a conservative building style with these big roofs and everything. But also because of that, they never managed for more than 10 years to build a library, for the simple reason that the people are also essentially living here because they pay no taxes. And so no taxes means no public funds, means no library. It's a very simple equation, unfortunately, but so they were forever looking for a possibility. Long story short is that here you see a school. In some way, by combining funds, which was funds for some extra classrooms for the school plus the library, would maybe allow them to do this competition. So this competition we won 3 years ago, and anyway, the site was here somewhere. I mean, there was a small house which was already on its way out, let's say. The school, and though it been said maybe later that will change, but we have not much to say about it. And so we kind of decided to bring a figure I mean, we use that metaphor often when we talk about the bridge, which you saw on the poster, but I will not showing the bridge, so maybe I have to use it here. I mean, say the tondo, which are these kind of Renaissance paintings with this kind of round edge, which were actually initially painted in this round way because you could hang them everywhere. They would never not have this kind of problem that a certain rectangular composition would not fit. So in a sense, I think the circle here was the same thought. You know, kind of you make a circle and it somehow fits easily. So there's always a bit of context to it. There's always a bit of background to the school, background to the street, background everywhere. So here you see that. And you see also that, you know, it's of course much bigger still than big houses, but it somehow belongs to the context, and due to its simple form or figure, it does stand out. So this was the competition collage on perspective. It was still red brick in the competition, and we changed that. So it's very simple. It's in a way a circle. It has a pitch through, but of course the pitch through of a circle gives a kind of strange effect. And what was very important for us, it has in a way no windows. It has only this big hall, which is the hall of the board of the patio of the garden, compacted that. And then it has a set of openings which start here, which is the entrance, and then a few more, the same in a rhythm, which seek a relationship with the school. So inside, there is this part, the patio, this court. And important for us was that it's a library, so in a sense, I mean, there was always the question, can you do a library plus a kind of a reading garden? It's of course very banal and very pragmatic, but important for that. So, I mean, if you want a real garden, part of a library, you have to fence it, otherwise people run away with the books, so, and you don't want a fence, so you include it in the building. So you have the reading garden in the middle of the building, and somehow it becomes the place from which you read the library books. Also, the library is in a way nothing more than, as you can see here, as a whole, I mean, kind of a continuous perimeter of bookshelves, vertical and then the horizontal inflow, which are essentially the building. So the shelves carry the building, carry the roof, make the building. See that here? You see the perimeter. You see half of the square is this library garden, the shelf system, and then a quarter, almost like a pizza size, is cut out. And that pizza quarter with the windows, as you can see on the top, is like a space, which is a shared space, which can be a reading room of the library, but which is of course also in the week, in the day, becomes something like a refectory space of the school next door. And you also see that was interesting because it was not there in the competition, and then we changed that. That triangular room does not touch the garden. And it has a lot to do with the fact that there is this weird thing that, I mean, of course, you wish it's not true, but it is true that some people in the library will simply come, older man, to look at kids the whole day. You know, I mean, and this kind of problem of proximity is also interesting. So on the one hand, you want to combine, but on the other hand, you want to keep the distance. So there's this kind of complex game in including and not. So here, these two triangles are the toilets, and then of course the spaces for the director of the library, or the librarian, sorry, I should say. Here on the top of this triangle, there's a set of extra classrooms, which again look at the course. So here you see it. And here you see, well, you know, this library has a whole set of, I mean, other ideas. I mean, but since my lecture is so long, I will not go much into that, but it has to do with how, in a way, I mean, here this diagram is of course interesting there, and you know, this kind of suburban house exposed in some sense. So I mean, you take a figure, but you change it. In this case, I guess it was making it almost more closed than you would expect. So here is the model. I mean, the model, and then how you try to kind of combine these things. And then here you see, you know, this library we developed together with Richard Bennett, an artist with whom we work quite often. And then it ended up with Richard making this kind of strange circular podium in the middle of the garden, like a kind of art intervention, which says something of the genre that a library does not exist without library garden to read books in Latin. So here you see the execution plans. all the drawings. What was in the end extremely hard for us to realize, and we perhaps underestimated that, but we somehow after years managed, is that of course making a library out of shelves is a beautiful idea, but a shelf system has a certain precision and necessary precision, otherwise it's a bad shelf. And a building obviously has another one. And so to kind of combine these worlds, so in other words, make the verticals of the shelf precise enough that they could still work as shelf and be a good shelf, but at the same time, reasonably loose that it would actually be possible for a normal contractor to build and not the kind of a crazy Swiss carpenter. I mean, that turned out to be quite a challenge, but it worked. Part of the trick was in a way to kind of pre-prepare these kind of library pieces and then do the last cut, and so I guess they're all a little bit different, but you don't really see that. So here's the library. So you have the entrance and you have you see still the glimpse of the books. Here in the library, and you see the roof. It's all very simple. You have this perforated plasterboard on the top for sound. You have this slightly green painted structure in the end. You have also a floor which is a little bit tinted in the green way. Here, there's two sets of pictures. So in some you will see just the garden as it is here now, which is still pretty just the beginning. That's a few months ago because the library opened only, I think, 6 months ago, or maybe 8. And here you see that again and again. But what was funny is that there was a lot of resistance to this library. Actually, the librarian hated the library for a long time until we built it. And then she was super excited. And she was most excited of the fact that since in a way it's a linear library, so it doesn't have the typical departments like kids and this and that, because you couldn't do that. And first that was the biggest drama in the world. But then they decided to move all the kids' books on the lowest parts, and then all a certain, a section on the floor and so forth. And all their stock, so to speak, on the top. So in a weird way, the architecture forced them to rethink the way they saw library organization. And now you have this fantastic situation that kids are below and the parents above, and it's much more a cohabitation. So it's fun. So I know people think that we're not very humanist, but they're totally wrong. So look at how humanist we are. So this is the refectory. This has this folded table. So when actually it's not in use and this wall, they are all back, and then it becomes, for example, a lecture space for the library. And there's this. I think you see it here. Yeah. I think here in the back you see that has a mirror or kind of shiny aluminium doors which can open and could make it as one big space. And there's the windows towards the school. Here you see the garden already slightly more. Slightly later, a few weeks. The structure, but I talked about it, and yeah, you see here that in the end, this garden became, in a sense, the most important public moment of this big house, house with a garden. And I like it a lot for that, because in a sense there was so much fear that the library would not live up to its kind of culture, or its public expectations. But I think as it turned out now, you see how quick it goes. Also in Belgium, since climate change, trees grow very fast, as you can see. The library. So just to say this thought of this, or this idea of this big house, and I think here you see this very much. What on earth is this? Kind of a strange object again, which is part of the house. But at the same time, consciously public. I wanted to use as to jump. Take the roof, take the slope, maybe take the garden, and we arrive here in Brussels. This is a project called the Brussels Beer Project. It's here. And perhaps a little bit less sprawling than what I just showed before. And so this is Brussels, and what is considered the center of Brussels is much more north. Here you have this kind of pattern. This is Anderlecht, and this is in a way the canal, which used to be very, in a way, vivid kind of industrial area, and it's not anymore for quite a while. and in fact is now subject to a lot of transformations. Here they're going to build a lot of nasty kind of housing complexes. And there is a desire really to still keep something of its old kind of production close to that canal. And that's very interesting. So if you think of a city in the widest sense, a large city, where production at least needs to find back its place, perhaps, with a certain, I would say, call it hipster reinterpretation of older industries, there's a chance to some extent. So here, it's a brewery. So, and of course, Belgium, beer, I have to admit, I don't like beer, but beer, Belgium, Brussels, it has a history. There has been always different breweries, but not anymore. One of the most famous breweries now is actually Art Center, the Wheels in Brussels. And so here there was a chance to bring back an idea of a brewery. And it's an interesting idea of industry, right? Because a brewery is industry on the one hand, but at the same time it's also a very gentle industry. And maybe there's a couple of collateral aspects to that industry which are nice for everybody. So here is the site. The two guys who started this Brussels beer project are very smart. They convince everybody to get a lot of money to use exactly that site, and the idea maybe use the canal in the future to transport. Let's see if that ever happens. These are the guys. They kind of every 6 months or so they invent another mix in their beer brewery, and then they always have another color code, and some colors come back, and then there's always another name, as you can see. And some of them stay. And so it was a competition, and so well, how do you do that? A brewery for this brand. It's interesting, but at the same time also, I don't know. It inspired us, this kind of this very colorful kind of thing in some sort of I would say almost Venturi-esque kind of very direct translation of a sign. But of course, an implicit sign, because which of the beer bottles would you represent? None, of course. So there was an idea: could you make something which is in a way a set of colors, somehow connectable, if you know the story a little bit, to what they are doing, but not knowing, of course, what the new mixes, the new brews would bring. So big box, big sign, color, but also in a way the tent. Can you make an industrial building which pretends to be a tent? And I think architecture is a lot about pretending. There's a lot of things you would like it to be, but you do not really manage, or you would like it to be light, but in fact it's heavy. There's this kind of thing. So that's certainly here, and it's an industrial building. So it's a competition, sure, but for a brewery, so there's no money, and you can count on that. And you see here, this inspiration is sometimes, this Pomona temple by Schinkel, this kind of light tent on top of this heavy little temple. Okay. So here you see the collage of the competition. Here you see the full action. I think it's not the best picture. It shows how it results. So it should maybe be later in the presentation, but you see it, right? And then you see that there's a roof there on the construction. So here back to the site. So the building is extremely simple. It's a losange-shaped building. It even became a losange during the process because it was a rectangle first, and we kind of made it into a losange. And a very big roof on top. So here you see that. This roof, in a way, makes it kills anything, right? The roof is so present that whatever you do under the roof is secondary to the roof. That was also a little bit trick. So the roof is inside and outside. Outside it overhangs and it makes kind of a protected part of a beer garden. Inside it is the main reference to what happens. There's this perimeter, which is this kind of a rectangle, this losange. Inside there's only a set of tables, and the tables carry all the objects of all the paths of the brewery. So that's how it was. This is the thing on the construction. So you see this enormous, in a way, plate. And then you already, so these colors, I guess you will see that better when we zoom in. But essentially, they're corrugated, painted, industrially painted steel. And because of their corrugation in a certain direction, they're just stiff. Technical, simply a cheap solution. And it's outside and inside, and then there's a certain way you see that mirror, so to give the sense of lighting. So here, so what was the main decision? The perimeter maybe initially all in concrete, but that was too expensive. So in the end, steel structure which carries this kind of concrete, kind of how do you call it, sandwich plates in a sense. You see the structure, you see the plates. 4 openings, always central to each of the sides, but since the building is slightly shifted, they're not central to each other. And inside these big steel tables with another round section column, which are also always systematically painted black. So in a sense, paint becomes a very important kind of tool to make this thing work. So in a way, a perimeter made out of steel with these concrete plates. Inside, steel tables which inhabit, so to speak, the perimeter protected by the tent-like roof, so to speak, and then which carry all the things from an office to a machine to a van, as you can see here. I mean, they're of course also very pragmatic because while all these surfaces are tiled, it feels almost like a table, but it's also extremely pragmatic. They're tiled, I mean, because of course when these vats, when they clean them, when beer spills, when they pick out beer, time and again, these zones have to be almost managed separately. So there's a lot of pragmatism to it, but at the same time, of course, it suggests a certain evidence. So in the two, in a way, triangular spaces, we have here a kind of compost machine, and on the other hand, an important stair which gradually goes up to a kind of a bar-like space, a kind of bathroom on the top. So here you see that. You see also that the tables do not do any effort to fit the height of the openings. The openings are the building, the tables inhabit the building, and on the tables are the objects which inhabit the tables, you know. So it's kind of, everybody does what they're supposed to do, but they do not care so much about each other. That's a bit the thing. So here you see that again, and then here you see these flats. I mean, I guess the only thing you probably ask that question, so you think, how on earth can it be that these flats just perfectly fit that section? Well, because we figured out that the way these objects are developed are by volume. So it doesn't really matter how high or how low they are. They always have to have a certain volume. So you make them a bit fatter when they're lower, and you make them a bit thin, skinnier when they're higher. So they always kind of work. So I mean, so that's how we essentially could suggest. And here in the drawing, you see the full operation. You will see in the picture if you look carefully that not all these vats are already placed, because of course they have the building. You can take off the roof again. You can add more. This is a very full capacity, maybe 10 years or so. But details, as I said, corrugated on both sides in 2 directions, and then kind of mirror aluminium plate here to give this sense of lightness of course, something which is not at all light. So the building as it is, not. So it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's let's see it right. I think it's 14 meters high, if I'm not mistaken, or it's higher. Anyhow, so this is a 5-meter window, and then this, in a way, is the same size as this. And you see, this is in a way only detailing of the greenhouses, the mirror, and then these straps, and then always these beams in all of the colors, of course, which make this thing possible. So here they're overhanging, and then it's all about how you detail drills and other things, and whether they belong to one or another thing. Here you see the beer garden. You already saw in full action in the smaller picture. It's important, so it makes a space. And here you see it again. So inside, whether it's office space, as you can see here, or whether it's the machines, they all, in one way or another, inhabit space, I would say happily. Of course, one of these typical pitfalls of that kind of architecture is that in order to make it look like that, you have to design every single idiotic tube and vent and everything. I mean, not design it because everything is cheap, but at least be sure that it's made out of galva and not out of plastic and stuff like that. But I mean, it's this kind of, in a way, interesting problems. Here you see, in a way, the space in between, the triangular space where also the stair is, but interesting problems which are the immediate consequence, of course, of that kind of decision making. So up to the top room, which now has this kind of bar where you could have a drink. So here you see it again from the side, and here you see also, of course, it's the scale and what kind of things it has to. And it's essentially just industrial. You see also in comparison to its immediate context how much bigger it is. So, but this big roof has some kind of public gesture. I mean, there it's a brewery. Is it public? Is it not public? Yes, I think it is, because in a way it changes the area. It makes that garden. All of a sudden, people go there now. Having drinks. I mean, it became almost like a bar in some weird way, which is funny for an industrial building. Here it's obviously not a bar. This is the very opposite. You would rather want to frequent this place much less often. This is a crematorium. But yeah, they all look a bit similar, I admit that. But so here you see again, the large city here is. What's interesting about this photograph is this is what they call standards in the city at the sea in Belgium. And this is polders. But in a sense, these polders are as artificial as is the city. I mean, all these polders are reclaimed land. They were once sea. They need an amazing irrigation system in order to keep them alive. And I mean, in that kind of artificial landscape, the decision was made to, in good old tradition, to build a crematorium. Where you used to build, say, the cemetery just out of the city, but then the city grows. And here, in a sense, this building of death, let's be honest, I mean, it's a complex building. It's a bit similar in the way it is used nowadays, of course, to what used to be a church, but it's very different because it's only used for that. So it's very, it's very, in a way, particular. I mean, so people have a very ambivalent relationship with it. At the same time, in Belgium, I think we went from only 10-15% people cremated when they die to, I think, 70 or 80%. So in 10 years' time, this is I would say, the choice, most people seem to make when you leave the planet, so to speak. Now, it's interesting because it means that you have a building which is extremely important in our current, say, society. Which, I mean, come on, if such a high percentage of people pass by, that means also family members, friends, in these cases. But at the same time, it's a building with a lot of weight. A building where you don't want to really go to very much. And it is true there was a program in Flanders. So I mean, from Brussels, Flanders, Belgium. I know for people that might be very confusing, but let's say the region, where all these cities are, and they started to build collectively an amount of crematoria. So because they realized we don't have them, we don't have the capacity, these buildings are necessary. And I mean, and I think it's been a very, in my opinion, confusing investigation of its form. Like, what is this? I mean, what kind of building is this? What does it have to represent? I mean, these buildings are used by people with a very different religious conviction. So, I mean, now and an hour later by another group of people entirely. So, and how do you do that? But for all of them, it's an important moment. It's a complex moment, and very often a very sad moment, of course. So this is and that in the middle of nowhere, but that nowhere is, of course, artificial. So here, the nowhere of the time of the competition was that there was a sign, which was this here, and on the side was an old brick factory, which they were at that time actually dismantled. And that side, as you see, was polders, but there was a plan north and perhaps also south to plant, massively to plant trees in these polders. Which is, we worked here together with the landscape designer Bas Smets, and it was heavily contested by Bas. He said, well, it's nonsense, polders are polders, why would you make it into a fake forest? That's nonsense, but if they want trees, we have to try to find solutions. I come back to that, because it's an important element in a way in the landscape. We did not want to build it on top of what was a former brick kind of factory, we just moved it outside of it, which, by the way, created another problem, which I maybe come back to, I don't know. And okay, then the building is that little square, as you can see. It's not so small, it's 50 by 50 meters. You see. So this is the competition design. And what was important for the competition design was that, in a way, we pushed it, as I said, far away from the street. And we made, in a way, the way you would arrive at the building, we tried to stretch it as much as you could, so you would come from a distance and you would kind of approach the building and then maybe park here. So this kind of view on the landscape. This was a kind of graphical representation of this kind of planting of the trees around it. And this was, in a way, what Bas suggested, that in these folders, you always had these parallel lines, which they call rabat. And these lines are, what are they? They are essentially that the trees, in order to survive, they have to be planted a bit higher, because if you would plant them in this kind of wet ground with the boulders, then you would die, the root would die. So in a way, you dig next to it, you make a little hill, so to speak, in section, and then so the trees would survive. So he proposed that. Now, the irony of the thing is that the Green Party in Ostende was totally opposed to that, because they thought it was an artificial landscape, whereas the pool is artificial landscape. And they have been, during the whole process, after winning the competition, done everything to stop the landscape design, which is a rather crazy thought, if you ask my opinion. But this is how the world today functions, right? That your friends are your enemies, so to speak. But okay. So here, I mentioned this because it's important that for us we would approach, still you do that today, but not so far, you would approach the building from a distance and you would only see it from that distance. So what is the building? I think here, well, you see there's a couple of, there's the roof. The roof I come back to, very important. Well, the building is in a way one big roof, as you saw it already in the model. Slightly tilt, you see it here. And that roof, okay, we did some investigation on how that would go about, but I skip that. And this I also will skip. I think the more important is here, that view on the right. It was for us important that that roof was the essential, I would say, identity of the building. And the main reference we had in our mind, and that was in a way what we saw before, the bones and everything there, bones, is the idea of the still life, the nature morte. So was it possible to make this building in some kind of gigantic nature morte, a kind of a composition? Since the roof would be tilted, you would see it. It would allow us to incorporate things which you don't see in this image, because they were incorporated. Say the chimney, because there's a chimney connected, of course, to burning bodies, let's be honest. But I mean, there's a very clear need, desire to not see that chimney. I mean, you cannot make a crematorium with a chimney because of all associations of chimneys and burning people. And you cannot see smoke. Well, for that, of course, there's a kind of elaborate machinery to clean the air. But that's inside. That's also why the top is higher. You need these machines, you need space. But also, so in this composition of objects, you have light objects of different kinds, but it looks like some kind of strange composition of things and not more to still life. Again, we worked on this together with Grisha. On the highest point, you see that here, we hang this long plate, which somehow gives a certain privacy to these cars who come on the more technical side. I'll come back to that too. So an important reference for us, I mean, it was always there, and it's funny, bring it back here, was this never executed, I think it wasn't even one, project by Lucio Fontana. I think it was for the Montreal World Expo, if I'm not mistaken. But it kind of lingered in our head, you know. Imagine Fontana does a building, so you make the holes and you do some kind, you add something and you tilt it a little bit like this. I mean, and this kind of tilting, I mean, well, you know, I mean, if I see it here, I guess it's undeniable that there's a parallel. So here you see it again. So you approach the building, so to speak, and then here that for us fundamental view. So this was really the image for us. So tilted roof, a set of parallel walls and columns which carry the roof, so that the roof in some sorts becomes a little bit like a table again. And there were tables inside the brewery. Here the table is really to a certain extent the building. And again, this is the architecture, because I think anybody here can understand that if you do all these parallel walls, do you need all these columns? Probably not. But it's important that there's a roof, and the roof is a figure, and then under it in some way protected, you could say, is this set of parallel walls, which is the building. So here are pictures, sometimes mention it, but it's always true, by bus. I see it in the landscape that's still totally not planted, as you can see, because the bus was stopped, the other bus, so this bus sprints and bus pets, bus sprints and the photographer, bus nets the landscape designer. So here the building is there as some kind of ghost of kind of that nature, I guess. So here the plan, I mean, I could go fairly quick because there's otherwise too much things still to do. But I mean, so here what's important, I guess, is that the lowest part of the building is here. So you come in the lowest part, very intimate, only 2.20 meters. We thought it was extremely important that when you would come in that building in this state, because let's be honest, you're not in the greatest moment of your life, that there's a sense of intimacy. Then it is a machine, we don't have to be naive about it. So typically there's two families or groups of friends or groups you gather, you either whether here or there, because there's a service here and there's a service there. They're never at the same time, but when one is started, already a half an hour later, and this still be busy, the other one will be in preparation. That's how it works, because there's a crazy capacity. It's really a machine in some sense. So it's very, very odd. So I try to solve this in a set of parallel walls, as you see here, and the walls are either very thin or blown up with air, so like this, which is actually the offices, so they're close by, so it can help you. Quite thick here, where there's also toilets and the sasses to go into these two halls. Between the halls, there's double doors which could open, so they could be in an occasion, bit like here, funny enough, there would be the second room, so to speak, right? There would be a relation. Behind that wall, a very technical wall, there's here the ovens, and here all the machinery to clean the air. So you see that here in section, and I think there's more technical section later, but the way I can explain it here. So here, this is the machine. But this machine is also a completely independent building, just concrete, no insulation, nothing, produces enormous amount of heat, of course. And that heat is then, that maybe is odd, but totally ecological. But nevertheless, if you tell it to people, they're only really bit shocked. That heat is used to warm the building. So here you see that model again, you see the set of rooms, and here you see that whole, everything I just explained, but then with more detail. And here you see, in a way, I think you see better here, in a way that there's a radical cut between what happens here, and here there's a cleaning machine. And here's a chimney, which you will see as part of this kind of, it's a very long object, it's that one. Actually, the chimney is this. So you would never recognize it as a chimney, which is this here. And then here, indeed, the kind of public one. So, roof, and then the set of pictures. So, again, I mean, there's context in which I would sell it to you as a big box, of course. But here as a big house, what I find interesting is that it tries in all its details to negotiate an idea of scale. No? I mean, it tries not to be at all pompous. It doesn't try at all to be extremely accessible. It somehow is also not. I mean, there's a whole set of elements and almost like hurdles which we try to introduce. So that, I mean, the doors also in the end are fairly small. And so that, I mean, the moment you're finally in, you're in the house. I mean, and you're in the house in this occasion, probably with your friends, probably not very happy. So here you go. So the doors, indeed, the openings gradually increase. So you see they're very small. They're a little bit bigger here. The walls also a bit higher. Here you see that between the two walls. All the glass facades are kind of covered by this corrugated perforated aluminium, so it works like a curtain. So you don't see from outside what happens inside. From inside, you have a slight veil, kind of a slight manipulated view to the landscape. So here, one of these light wells. Also the furniture brings in the air. We worked on this again very much together with Richard Venlet. Also, this wall is part of that. Here you see that, you see also how the ventilation works, because you have to push a lot of air in these spaces because people feel very insecure and are immediately unwell. So that's the second room, a slightly smaller room with another opening, and again the same furniture. And then that wall, as you saw, in a way makes what we call the family room. I think they explain it very well. But here the idea is that in a minimum of space, you have a whole set of possible uses. So essentially, if I go very, very quick through this, you arrive here, you sit here, the family prepares here, or people very close. At the end of the service, you say, you do your condolences. That's here, so they open this wall in a sense. The few members stand here in the back. And people go out immediately under the covered roof, so they have fresh air to be in a way outside as fast as possible. That's what you want. So there, I mean, there's again a research on how with a very minimum of space or space differences, you do this in a way fairly complex set of maneuvers or things. So here we go back to the same images. Detail, and here there are the ovens, which are these weird black boxes, as you can see them here, with the pink doors, which are again bigger. You see, and it's true. I guess it's the first crematorium, at least in Belgium, which is so colorful. I mean, and so at first when you presented, they were like, "Are you crazy? All these colors." I mean, no, it's a building of death. And now everybody is extremely happy because it completely changes your relationship with this event. I mean, typically the crematoria are dark and they're kind of corrugated steel and I don't know what. It's so dramatic. And I guess there's already enough drama in the event. So here you see that. And voila. That's the back, you know, it never fits, right? I mean, everything is super systematic, but then you see here is the increasing size of openings of each of these walls. Right. So it's a bit of a jump, I guess, between the crematorium and the kind of this bizarre pill-shaped building here. There's a building in Charleroi, which is again in Belgium. This is Charleroi. And whereas the other buildings perhaps were an attempt to define the big house, I guess here I tried to bring up a little bit back, and I did it a bit in the introduction, the idea of the large city. Because I think the big house was maybe born indirectly in Bahrain. I guess the large city was born last year. I was working with my students a whole year on this city in Belgium, which is in the French-speaking part, which is in a way a strange remnant of industrial revolution, so to speak, which is a former coal mining city, which is littered by these objects here, which are these slag heaps. And these slag heaps are the results of all the coal bringing out, and then the leftovers to make these big heaps of them. And since it has stopped this whole procedure already in the 60s, we have a bizarre phenomenon, and this is a drawing which was made by the students in Malaysia, but they have this bizarre phenomenon that there's endless amount of, in a way, hills, which now have been abandoned for 40, 50 years, so they feel like nature. So you have a kind of bizarre artificial nature, which although they kind of course, have to share the stage with some kind of industrial buildings or the leftover of it, steel factories, mining buildings, and so forth, together with city fragments, because it's a city, Charleroi. It's a city of 300,000 people, very few, of course, but on a territory as big as Paris, so in a very large territory. And so we were working on this parallel while we were in a way developing this project for the city. Well, not for the city, because it's in a way for a startup. It's called Aerospace Lab. It's a startup which young guys who started I think only 7-8 years ago producing very small satellites. Started with 5 people I think and around 300 people. So all of a sudden the city looking for attempts to revive and rethink what is industry in this context. They said come here. There's plenty of space and everything is big already. So this is the context I was just describing. This is really today, it looks like that. I mean, it's a bit menacing in a sense, but it's also in a sense really beautiful, I would say. And this, we see a lot of these slag heaps there. And in a sense, I mean, without wanting to add too much theory, we were intrigued by because the kind of green archipelago, city in the city, this idea of objects all together, making urbanity in some way, and certainly post-COVID, where everybody all of a sudden wants to do trail running and trail biking and all kind of other things. That kind of place was attractive. And that place was not attractive before, but this kind of abundance of space is you feel that people are like saying, oh, it's so cheap there. And actually these hills, you can perfectly run there. And I was there with the students a few times. You climb the hills, you run the hills. You forget, you don't know, you don't realize that they're artificial. They're just nature or what you imagine. And yeah, a bit of these thoughts, a bit of bounce and whatever. I mean, the object of the landscape, if you want, of the land. And then here you see in this kind of pattern of big and small. We were asked to develop this building on that side. And that side is odd in many ways. It's a site which there's a couple of big housing complexes there, big modernist bars. There's also whole industry. There's a big police station. And then there's a nice existing building. You can see it here, but you don't see it because it's made white. Kind of 1960s building. It's typical post-Kevin Roach kind of curtain steel with very small office building. So this police, slabs, and the side. So in a way, long story short, we thought it would have been a pity to demolish that small building, even though they asked us because they wanted the office to be there. And then here the big hall for their production of satellites. So we proposed somehow to do everything in the same spot. So we do the office on top of the hall. and to use that building, which is hard to renovate unless you put a lot of money, because it's a kind of exoskeleton curtain steel. I think there's a picture and turn them into a kind of parking silo for the building, so that at least you didn't have to park on what is now the trees. So it would be a pity. So in a way, in this kind of patchwork of everything at the same time, the large city, you try to keep everything as particular and as proud as it could be. So, a patch of green, the building is the biggest possible building. The little office building is the office building. So here you have a sense of scale, some research. And here you see on the lower left, you see that building is very much, this is John Deere kind of aesthetics of Roche, but then of course Belgian scale, so 1/200 or something. But okay, still, worthwhile to try. And then, our kind of, as you can see, the build shape is extremely simple. It's the maximum rectangular kind of white hall. This is kind of white laboratory hall where they build in fairly precise manner the satellites, and then all their kind of the machinery, the ducts, and the rest. And then on top, offices. So this is a project, and then a bridge between. And here you see, how we kind of explain a little bit what it is. This very light facade, it's perforated, corrugated aluminium, then a very simple structure. This roof, this thick anyway roof with offices on top with these big cylindrical holes which are pass-throughs. So here you see that. Here you see the machinery around the hole, and here you see it again. So here you see some of the holes, at least in our early design, would make then light wells into the hole. And of course, it's meanwhile where they kicked out because they don't want light in that hole, and you can imagine. But that doesn't matter so much because they're still on the top in their offices. So this is in a way the image. And of course, I guess apart from the fact that I like the project a lot, but here in this context, I think what we thought was interesting is that it's almost an exercise in coexistence. So you do some kind of urbanism by accepting all the elements and their relative performance, and you give them the stage so that they can perform well. So here you have the formerly known as office building turned parking garage. You have the big kind of industrial pill-shaped production building, and you have the bridge which connects the two. So you have that. Here you have the lab building, right? This is where you make satellites apparently, and this is how you show them. And then this is where you think about them, I guess. So this is in a way as simple as it can be. Now we started building this, and so I'm very happy also about that. And in a way, I'm happy to combine it with the buildings you saw before, because of course it's a very different building. But in the way we have to deal with material and color and paint is very similar to what you saw in the brewery. It's of course an entirely different scale. So here you see that. Essentially nothing can be really decided. It's a structure, it's beams, sometimes it's a concrete column because it's a logic, sometimes it's a steel column because it's a logic. If you want the columns to be part of the same family, you have to paint them in the same color. If you want it to be a different family, you leave it like that. So, it's amazing how, in a way, at a certain point, architecture becomes a kind of explanation of your intentions. I think these intentions are important, but I certainly believe that it can make a beautiful project. So here you see that again. This is kind of the situation. So this is a kind of, the large city. There's a small house, there's a big building, there's a garage, there's a patch of green, there's some trees, there's slabs, the police. This is it. Like that. Now, the jump you might think sounds strange. You go from Charleroi to Switzerland. You think this is like the first you can go, and I even jump over the mall. But ultimately, I would argue that this is not so different from that. And of course, you would say, but there's the mountains and there's the lake. But the truth is that the mountains are not Switzerland, but are France. The Swiss don't want to admit that, but that's true. And actually, everything which happens here is of the same relentless ignorance of anything which you could consider urbanism. So this is the campus of EPFL. And the UNIL is actually here. So EPFL is a technical university, a polytechnical school. UNIL is in a way the social sciences. Here, this is what they call so beautifully in French, pavillionaire, you could say in English, suburbia or something. But of course, I mean, because they ate the whole edge, it's very thick towards the lake. And then in the last stretch of urbanization of the whole campus, they had decided, the first step, of course, is fantastic building of Tsujima Nijizawa, this kind of a very long kind of a piece of landscape, the learning center. And then there's this kind of, I would say, slightly less successful under one roof, which is this Kengokuma building, which is there. And so this is a bit the context. And here, next to a very strange building with a weird, slightly curved edge, was a site for competition. Here you see that. For a new radio television. And what I was thinking about this kind of the sameness and the kind of bizarre relentless occupation you see here very much. So which is house, and all school buildings in one way or another. And in a way, apart from the fact that some things look like a kind of beautiful print plate, there's not much else as a spatial logic. So here, this was the competition in a way site. This what you see here. This was the building. It doesn't really fit very well now I see in this image. These were the first ideas. So in a way to make some kind of space which was, I mean, it's a production space for media. It's a radio and television. It's odd because if you think about it, why does a radio and television company, the national radio and television company, want to inhabit a place on the university? That's one aspect. But why does the university want them to be there? Because in a way, land is expensive. I mean, why would you give it away? They have hardly any land left. You see it, it's the last piece in a sense. So what's the gain? I mean, a simple answer to the question is that actually in the master plan, they are not allowed to actually build school-related programs or classrooms in this zone. That's also why the learning center and this other one, you don't see here very well, it was there. And so they could also not do that here. And they can actually do that if they rent from somebody else. So if they build a building and then they start using it, that's okay. This is another thing. And then on the other hand, of course, we're talking almost 10 years ago when the competition was, I think 10 years ago. I mean, this whole idea of, it was even pro-COVID, is MOOCs as they called them back then, this kind of a digital school, I mean, how to kind of broadcast education and so forth and so on. So this is the context. So can you make a building that was for us important, which is and that was one of the very early collages, literally non-stop city, a very early typewriter version of that, cut into an ear shape because then it fits the site. Can you make a non-stop production space fit in a place which obviously is not non-stop? That was important. So you see it here. And so these are very early exercises. You see always this kind of cut of this building which is there. And then of course, do you cut the side just here or do you cut it everywhere so that this kind of, you have this piano ear shape, which was not important for us. It was important that there was no sharp edges. So everything, in a way, there's no clear ending. Everything doesn't really end. And then there's an amount of other objects, you see them here, which are able, you will see that, to carry that big production space and also interrupt that space. I think that was always very important for us from the beginning. And this interruption here, perhaps a little bit represented. I think comes another one by this Baldassari, like, you have an image, and then all of a sudden you have something else and you do not understand what you see in the image and you start to wonder. It puts the image under pressure. Very important. So here you see these early things and was there a circle and a rectangle? We were not entirely sure. It was a 3-stage competition, took a long time and it took like 8 or 9 months. And so I think this image of Baldassari is great. I mean, it's kind of violent space series. So you see these people also looking at something you do not understand because the white cutout kind of had put pressure on the scene, on the image. So here you see it's still the early version. You see with 5 mid-competition, not the end. So we were testing, we were looking. See here, and I like to show this here because we're talking here, we're still in a large city. We have this enormous building, and I think more than a house, we almost have a kind of a city-like problem. So how can you make something which in some way starts to have a constellation? And that was very clear for us from the beginning. You see that here, that in this kind of whole field, you start to have facades. You have kind of almost like shop windows or something. You see that also here. You're testing this. You see also that these facades tendency change, and that's also interesting in this architecture, which is in a way very formalist, if I can call it like that. I mean, there's a couple of things which are very fixed, but then other things, change. You have to, because you do a building which you start designing, and only 10 years later you build it. So, I mean, how can you deal with this endlessly changing program? If something changes, it's certainly media. I mean, the idea of how you make radio and television and the importance of it, and which of the all kind of multimedia, and which is the primary media channel, that is changing and changing all the time while building that building. So also the demand of spaces change, but what didn't change is in a way a set of big volumes carrying a plate, a kind of a field, if you want, where the production is done. So this is the competition plan. 4 big boxes with offices, with big halls, with recording studios and support, and then a field of editorial production. And that hovering above a space, and that's maybe why it hovers. I should explain it. On the one hand, it's in a way campus-like, buildings in the campus, like all the buildings around. So you just come in, you can do that. But also, nowadays, this recording of media is entirely done by mobile trucks. So these trucks is almost like literally Archigram plug-in city. They drive in, they stand here, they record, and after the event, after the show, after the news, whatever, they drive somewhere else because they record something, which happens in the country, and they go back. And so then they have to be repaired. Here was a small garage, now the garage is even bigger. So it's like a fire station. I mean, there's big trucks which are really loud like a fire station. So then you have to, of course, carry that plate. So basically, we use these 4 buildings, these kind of boxes, as columns, you could say. And then we have these beams which carry from box to box and carry the whole plate, which is essentially just a shed-like building. You see that here. It's got a very big space with northern lights. So boxes, field, open space below, fire station. So here you see that. You see the entrance, you see how going. Here you see the typology box. These were all the perspectives of the competition. So this is how it was then presented. These were, I mean, in a way, the 2 spatial types which were from 10 years ago until now there. The box, which contains all kinds of things with certain kind of, with walls, with perimeters, with closeness, with all kind of layers of control. And then the field, with the total openness, with facades, which has, literally facades of the boxes and interruptions and the pressure. So that's it. This was the project. So then fast forward, a couple of years ago, just before actually starting to build the final version of the building, these images were made for the client so that they remembered what it became. So this is the building. This is the building as it was. It's the same thing. I mean, it had another facade, but for all the rest, it has this all the same features. So you see that. You have the stair, you have the field, you have the sheds, you have the boxes. These were these images. This is the interior images as they were. I mean, with an orange floor, now the orange is out, meanwhile, it's kind of weird green, okay? More like this. And then here you see it's under construction. So the reason why I wanted to bring this in here, of course, it's many aspects. There's the aspect of, I would say, this topic of intimacy and threshold I tried to bring in other projects already too. But of course, also this idea, which I think for us is extremely important, is that you design an architecture which is almost entirely independent from the way it is used. But at the same time, because of that, we believe it is extremely functional. So here you see it in relationship to the learning. You see the structure, and then I go a bit faster. So you see it all the time growing. These are all pictures Bas took over the last 2 years, because I think they started really building 3.5 years ago, and now the last 2 years, finally, and you see that all this, in a sense, I would dare to say insanity, because it does feel sometimes a bit like that, is all the super consequence of very simple decisions. So there's the sheds are parallel, there's a structure, they go from one point to the other, there's the beams, the dimension of the different profiles is simply calculated by the engineer. All the knots are the knots. And then there's in a way the Y structure, the main red beams, and then the facade, which has also another vertical, as you can see here, So that is in a way the green beam of the facade. There you see the chassis again on the top. You see, I don't know where you see it. Here you see that actually the gutter is not entirely finished. It's also integrated in this beam because you have to somehow solve your water issues and so forth. And there's another system which is this mezzanine, these tables again. Yeah, tables appear and reappear. You see them here. And here you see what that then brings, which is kind of something rather strange. But everything is totally constant. And so and we go on and we go on. So I mean, this is now more or less the state where the project is. I mean, you know, of course, it has a lot of echoes, even of the brewery, I think, but in another level. I mean, this machinery tanks. I mean, this is the heating, the air ventilation, that all in the shed. I mean, you know, oddly enough, it's not a building with a gigantic budget, but at the same time, a lot of attention had to be put to make it beautiful, to make it work, to make all these machines, since they're all apparent, to make them part of the architecture. If you go down, you have this big hovering plate. I mean, there will be a kind of a corrugated ceiling, totally not visible here. You have 3 of these glass facades, and through one of these, you see here directly into the garage. And in front of the tarmac where all these trucks will be standing. So you will arrive, you will be in the campus and you will come there, you see all these trucks maneuvering, even driving around there, while you take potentially the stair up. So here you stand under this is the side of the campus. There's 2. And here you see that stair, which is hanging actually from above, which is the main stair inside the show. So here you see the last 2 pictures, I think, where you see it from the learning center. Then I started finally with the facade, so we will be closer to where you saw it on the images a little bit earlier. So, but again, it's just a building. I mean, I like the building a lot. It was an enormous, slow process to do it. It's a very big building, but at the same time, it's strangely weird and small in scale. It's a building of many buildings. It's a small city. It's in a way, it's kind of this interior. In a way, an architecture has an inhabited interior. So if I use this notion of interior and inhabited interior and move here, and don't worry, it's not going to take forever. It's 2 more. I mean, I warned you. You can always walk away. I mean, so anyways, this interior, and it's interesting. I mean, for the small anecdote, because the building so before this one, I mean, of course, is a building developed, designed almost 10 years ago. And this building is designed 2 years ago. And in a sense, the world has changed. And I think partly for the better, in so much that there's another awareness about certain things. But so much so that people would look at that building and say, yeah, okay, I understand, but you know, why would you now spend so much money, so much energy, so much material, steel, concrete, whatever, on a new building for radio and television? This is kind of, it's not responsible. I mean, can you do that? I mean, I think there's a very easy answers on this, and I think you have to be careful about this kind of being the total victim of kind of responsibility in all its facets. I mean, here it's a radio and television company who decided to get rid of all their buildings and centralize everything in the spot where perhaps it's the most interesting in the logic of education. And as a national radio and television, of course, this company is gradually doing no more leisure, no more entertainment, no more nothing. So what do? They do information. And when they want to do information, they want to be there. Information next to the university, it kind of makes sense. Yeah, then you need to build a new building. I mean, there was no way out, so to speak. And then, yeah, you do that building and people would say, yeah, but then it hovers, can you imagine? What a macho gesture. But yes, but there's trucks which have to reach the boxes, and if you don't push it up, then you can't. You understand? So, I mean, people read tropes, I sometimes believe, very, very quick and very moralist, so to speak. So I say this because these very people then see that project and say, beautiful. Because it's an old building and it's transformed. Well, I understand. I mean, but for me, both projects are the same. I mean, they're even typologically extremely comparable. That's the fascinating thing about it. So, but it's true, whereas this building we saw before is a brand new building in the middle of a Swiss campus. This is an old building. It's an old slaughterhouse in Antwerp, in Belgium again, which in a way is part of a very big revitalization, if you want to call it beautifully, but you could say it's also a very smart development plan in which the building just so it's here. So basically, that's the current state. You see these two big halls. It's not in the same orientation. These two halls are former slaughterhouses. They were a big part of the whole site, which was an industrial slaughterhouse site, many other industrial boxes here, as you can see. Close to what was then still very much the harbor, has been cut off because of the highway, and it will be even cut more because the highway will go down, as you can see. So there's still that harbor, but this will become a park in the future. And then a developer who managed to somehow buy the whole site and find these slaughterhouses was a master plan minus net per room, which I think is rather intelligent, in which they tried to find the scale of these buildings, weaving it with the existing smaller houses around, and here and there finding a bigger elements. Now, the slaughterhouse, the biggest hall, the one that we were dealing with, more or less looks like that when you clean it a bit. It's a picture already in the midst of the cleaning. On the outside, you see them, they look more or less like this in the very beginning when you saw them, so it's fresher, so not so open, not so transparent, but you can see that structurally the top hangs on the structure, and then here below this were all infill, sometimes glass tiles, sometimes bricks, sometimes other things, so we felt we could take them away. And then this indeed already red roofs here. So what we suggested, I mean, it's a complex story, but I will simplify a little bit, is that essentially in this whole development, of course, these two buildings are very interesting. They have to be kept, more or less. The truth is, our building, more or less, the one next to it already much less. You can see in the master plan we cut it much more. And then important magnets for whatever happens there. So they were very keen, the developer, to convince the school, I mean, part of the Antwerp University, to come here. And it was a competition in which the university had to be convinced, and we were then somehow part of the competition, long story. In any case, we had to kind of make it credible that these halls could be a school. So here you see that how one is a school. I mean, there's a whole idea perhaps of urbanity, and of course the evident thing that I don't go into that here is it's the most beautiful transformed hall in Brazil. But also perhaps kind of an idea of a building which by making one building next to it or in the middle of it totally transformed. So I mean, we did the whole, transformed it, I come back to that, and we added one volume, one building, a little tower. In the hall itself, I guess the hardest part is how do you inhabit it without losing the amazing speciality of it, but knowing of course that you want to use it with a far higher density. You're not going to say ground floor. It's not like a food hall or something. No, it's a school, so I mean you cannot say the full height a classroom. That's not going to work. At the same time, you're probably able to make the building rooms which you could never build anymore today. That's the exciting thing about this whole building. So the way the plan is really simple. As I said, the lower part we cut the whole facade away. I mean, it was never structural, so it was infill. So making in a way a possibility to have classrooms around and round, and we took them away here in the end. Even this one we took away. So that's the entrance hall, and on the top the same. In the middle, you have a couple of darker auditoria and toilets and everything like that. And then what we do? We built a very simple, in a way, table. There I am again, my tables. And this table here, you see, actually here, cut where the stairs are. And this table inhabits that space. And that's in a way it. You have a table. On top of the table, you have all the labs. And below, you have all the big classrooms. So, I mean, this model is supposed to show that, but it doesn't. So, but the table is somewhere here. Then we also perforated the top facade with these round holes, not because they bring so much light, they bring hardly anything, but to kind of bring in a sense of direction if you're on top, that you're not simply having the light from the big shafts alone. And then below, of course, that's not necessary. So here, I don't know why this side is here, but you know, that's the side. You understood that now. That's the hall. That's the hall within the town. That's the same plan. And that's the way the sections. So here you see that, you know, the table with the labs, the ground floor with all the classroom, the tower with administrative function and some classrooms as well, and the roof. So here you see that again, and again, and again. So I think this is the most interesting drawing here. You have this table, you have the round section columns, concrete columns, right? The columns of the table, totally independent. You have the facade, which we did not treat on the outside, we only insulated on the inside, so we could keep the facade, we make the whole facade. We cut a little bit the columns which were carrying the facade, so we can put a glass facade in front of it, which was quite an operation. And then you have this existing shed, which is elastic, of course, and brings light into lab buildings. And then on the table, we put another table with machines. So in a way, just two tables, and then the rest is the building as it is. And then we try to, this is the image as we made it at the time. So you see we repaint the roof, also it's not just paint, it's also roofing, of course. The roof of the hall, the holes, the cut, and a very simple building next to it. The first collage, in the very first idea, the table was green, but of course that we never managed to keep it up. I think in retrospect, I'm quite happy it's not green anymore. But with that green came a lot of problems because we wanted the table to be green. That was okay. You could paint it green. You could do the top green, no problem. The column green, no problem. But then, after more and more studies, we realized that we had to treat the whole kind of ceiling with this kind of sound deflecting material. And then green was more expensive. Then you had, and then gradually we drove in our own kind of dead end to the point that we then threw out the green and looked elsewhere for the expression. So we did it's in a way simpler. It's more gray. Perhaps you see here there's still this was the idea, the last one, and then also the classroom below. This is also how we left it on one hole left because the table is higher. And you use the holes or for as a rear window or even as exhaust for the ventilation. This is, when we start putting the hole, we already took away the things. You see, the hole was also, we had to actually convince the developer, which was a big issue, to actually clean heavily the structure because they will simply want to repaint it. We took it away, and the structure is important. They had to chemically clean it to go back to the concrete because it was very, very messy. So here there was somewhere in between, and then we had to start cutting. So we cut all these holes. See it here. We put in the table. See that here. All very basic. That's the table. And then we started paving. You see here, this is the ventilation. Here you see very much different. So here it's this is how it is. This is the building. So you see the hall on the right, the tower on the left, and you see the sheds. You see here how the hall connects with the tower. It's a very simple little black tunnel. You see the round windows, and here again the ventilations. You see the new windows of the shed. And it's all about how you detail it. That's inside. So this, in a way, here, it was a big fight. Essentially, you want to have the whole. In a way, it's a set of parallel facade lines. So there's the new facade around the building, and then inside there's just two parallel lines which make the whole building transparent. And then just the yellow ribbon. See here, you see this. The lights are also hanging in a certain way. So ultimately, it's about. And then you see this enormous scale of that building. Which is something, even the RTS, despite all the effort, is only half as monumental. So you see it here, and here, and here, and here. So these are just new pictures. Bas took some pictures for the cookies, but they were not even so ready. So these are pictures we took a few weeks later. So they are very, very recent. And somehow I think they start to show really because it's in use now, right? It's in use since 3 weeks. It's on a mountain. I see, and here you see this. Yeah, everything is just what it is. So since you want to keep the aspect of the building, all the machines, all the tubes, everything comes from these tables, and it just inhabits the space. So this brings us to the one before last project. Yes, wow, amazing. So we go from here, and it's a bit tricky, of course, to go from that. Student this kind of weird slaughterhouse, let's say, the big slaughterhouse to this last house, or almost last house, which is it's a bit funny to do that here, but it's a faculty of architecture. in Liège, which is a French-speaking part of Belgium. So here you have Liège, and we go in and go a bit faster. It's a very old caserne, a complex with buildings which pretend to be old but are not that old. I mean, it was once even a convent, but the convent had been a church. Church was here, there's a monastery, there's all kind of 19th century buildings. There's a manege here, old manege, now a theatre. There's a very old building here, and for the rest, buildings which are so old. So you see that here, that's the oldest one here. So this is the current situation, manege with these buildings. Architectural faculty as it is now, somehow it had been this because it's Conferencia. And so the competition was in a way funny because they said, look, all this is our terrain, and these are our buildings. And how do you kind of make the new architecture faculty? And of course, this terrain is dubious because this is at the same time the garden or the square or whatever of the other building, so it's not so evident to build there. So, but still we tried, and still, I guess we took an enormous risk. We had lost 50 competitions in a row. We thought, whatever, we can try, you know. And so we proposed actually to do what the other 4 or 5 competitors didn't dare to do, I guess. We said, well, okay, since we can build here, why not build here? So we proposed to cut, you can see this a bit, sorry, to cut away over this, to take away that building, to make a big hole there, and to make a very long bar here, against that building, appropriating the whole see here, so we cut the foyer of aula, to 2 distinct buildings, and then a long bar here. I mean, it's true that in our competition design, as you can see here, we put a gigantic port in front of their offices, so these people were not very happy. So we changed that. But I mean, essentially, we managed to keep this idea, so axonometric alive. So we said, okay, if indeed the square is of the architecture school, let's take the square. Let's take the square. And not only that, if the architecture school wants to re-inhabit the caserne, this whole area, what should be the main what is the living room, what's the house, so to speak, of the school? Well, we thought the main thing is the studios, you know, is the ateliers. So we made of this bar a very big atelier building. So that's it. The atelier is a small exhibition, you know, it's things like that. It's where you live. That's where, as a student, you are in the school. So the back of that building, if you look at that street, is this. This is a blind facade, like a paper. It's a paper with a heading, you see. And then here there is this foyer, this aula, which connects these 2 buildings, which are renovated, and it gives also access to that street. So there's a core, the slab, and the aula. So these are the collages of the competition. So you don't even see that core, so you could also easily take it away. So here it's the idea of appropriating the core image. So this was it, with the kind of belvedere which is still there, but maybe less pronounced. And this idea that the classroom, also today, we believe in architecture, is a wall and a window. So a window to look at the world, and a wall to actually pin up, you know, because, you know, to pin up, to show a table or wall that not everybody is just behind their computers and not very all busy with what they're doing. We thought that was super fundamental to make walls in an architecture school. So that's in a sense also why that wall is so pronounced on the other side. So the wall, a window, and that's it. You inhabit the way that way. Okay, a lot of context, not important. My Kelly is always very relevant in some sense, you know, it's an educational context. Okay, but then of course also, and we thought that was an important point, is can you still make an architecture school which is unabashedly modern in a sense? I mean, why not be modern? I mean, we all know what modern is. Even in a caserne, we have to keep on educating with all the questions, all these things at the same time. So we thought that was a missing layer in the caserne, so that's why we proposed it. So here, there was some tests, I think we tried other things, and here the very first ideas, this long bar, the course, what you do with them, and so on. So this is the current situation now, I think, which went to permit. After quite a long process, it took more than a year. And in a way, here you see, go very quickly because otherwise you really think I'm crazily long. And so you have 5 floors. You have in a way, in the end, quite a big core. You have the hall, and that's it. So this is a school. This is how it was in the competition. and this is the way how it is presented now. You see it there. So it's really literally. You see also that this what we wanted to do is to bring these bars. There's a weird kind of culture of modernist Liège, which is a very strange city, which is at one time old, but at the same time it's full of these buildings. Bring it there. We thought it was important to bring it there, to not ignore that fact that this is also an important layer to the architecture. So these are the current images which show the project as we have now detailed it, and which is going to tender. And so this is the building. So the threshold is very important, so everything is a little bit higher. It's related in a way to the height of the building. On the two sides, there's this escape stairs, and then the terraces. See here, and this velvet there is the direct connection. And so we see the sides, and you see that it's really a composition of the wall, which is in a way this paper, the beams, the columns, and the roof. So and then you gradually inhabit this wall and you make it useful. So with this, I think as the one before last, we arrive here, and it's the very, very last. So if you were then saying, and it's a few slides only. So the big house, of course, as I try to move and deviate, it's an endlessly bigger growing idea of trying to negotiate an aspect of the public, I hope, with the world, right? I mean, like, how can I reintroduce architecture as something which is, I mean, consciously privatizing things, defining a line, and in that negotiation says, look, I can be a public building exactly in making, you know, a little obstacle, exactly by closing something, exactly by incorporating something, you know, always in a way through I would say, a certain idea of opposition, or, you know, kind of a counter move. At the same time, and then going back to the very beginning where I showed a few houses, I go back here to a very small project. It's currently under construction, but I don't think I show a picture of that, which is in Leuven, which is a city outside, not so far from Brussels. It's in this area which is prone to inundation, and it's very, you know, very present topic. Remember also that in Spain there's been many inundations with this heavy, this kind of climate scare, and I mean big things. Many people died, and so you have a kind of complex, in a way, problem or position also as an architect. So there's this person, this artist, who for some reason managed to convince the government that he could maybe still build an object here, which is actually a zone, here you see that, which is a kind of a natural stretch. In some sense, there was some kind of a building there, but which inundates quite frequently, actually only once every 3 years or something, but nevertheless it might get worse. And so in a sense, the main reason why he could convince them was that he argued that, you know, in a way it was on the house, that's a guy, that's his work. He's a very famous artist in Belgium. And that's of course the reason why he had the leverage to convince the people. And essentially we developed this kind of small studio for him here, which I would say is on the one hand a room, it's a house, but it's a public house. I mean, it's in so much so that it kind of exposes the idea of its negotiation with this kind of, in a way, shared land, which is this land, which is also, by the way, he bought that full terrain, but then he decided to give it back. So in a way, he only being there, and the rest is kind of a public land, part of, in a way, a park-like thing. And in that is this 2 rooms, one on top of one another. See them here. One is the atelier, one is a temporary stay when he did not manage to go back because he lived in Antwerp. This is the atelier, it's kind of wooden box inside the box, 1 window towards a kind of open space, and this is the other room, 2 windows somehow protected. So here you see that when he's there, he has to actually open the door because it's higher, as you can see, it's kind of lifted to 1.20 meters, so it can never inundate. So he has to open the door, which is a stair. He can enter there, and he can only go to the top room by stairs as well, which hang on the outside of the building, which he then has to go out to go back in. And so that's the thought. That's also what he wanted. So it gives his house a very strange kind of slightly mysterious, or this atelier character. So one of these plates, it was like a roof, is perforated and protects it from what's in the street, and the other one is not perforated, and he can use it for some kind of protection. So here you see the execution plans, very, very simple, and here you see the house or the atelier. And in that sense, I mean, when then the deluge comes, well, you know, I guess we will all drown, but he might survive in his studio, I mean, as some kind of last vestige of culture in the kind of self-destroying world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kersten, for the wonderful and engaging presentation. It's a bit late, so perhaps we do 1 or 2 questions so it doesn't become so long for everyone. I don't know if there's a comment or not from the audience. I am not going to do it if we're going to make 2, you know, Manuel.
Hi, Kersten. Impressive presentation, impressive work. Thank you for that. I was thinking about the last projects you presented, where there is a incredible shift in scale. It's a much bigger scale, and I was thinking that I want to know what you think about this. That content is much bigger, and it has much, one could say, critical mass in a sense, and restrictions that come from that content are in a way inescapable. And I was wondering if you find any new discoveries in relationship to, I believe, something that has been very present in the work of the office, at this Architecture Without Content.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think that this maybe last years of the office with bigger commissions in scale, with much bigger, let's say, pressure from content, has given a new light or a new horizons regarding this initial concept that now may have 22 years.
Yeah, 20 years. A long time. Yeah, well, look, I think there's, I mean, I have to avoid to give a super long answer again, but no, but I think there's a lot of topics here because, how to say, a very simple answer is that the building I somehow showed just a little bit over the middle of the presentation, the radio and television building in Lausanne, in the end is almost 10 years old, which is a long time, you know. I mean, that's of course true for architecture. That is, people tend to forget that, especially when the buildings tend to be bigger. I mean, the process of birth is a very long process. So, which is confusing, of course, because you cannot say something today which is super cool and fashionable because it has to be still relevant in 5 or 7 or 10 years. But at the same time, that project in Lausanne, for me, at the time, we won the competition. I was actually a professor in Lausanne, then I moved to Mendrisio. So it was very close to me, very dear to me, but that there was many moments I thought it would never be built. I mean, it looked like that, quite frankly. I mean, there were very, very dark moments. And somehow the building had to survive an endless array. I could not go too deep into that now here, but an endless array of projections of what the building was supposed to be. And in some weird way, it had to survive. So it had to, a bit like that image here, you know, it had to kind of survive all kind of crises, and it had to more or less look the same. I mean, we believe very much that the building was a set of boxes and this kind of plate. But I mean, honestly, in what 10 years ago was media and what is it today and how you organize it, whether you work in channels or not, whether you centralize editorial boards or not, whether you do, whether you record radio with your phone or you have rooms for it. I mean, everything changed. So everything. So you had, what was fascinating is that you were making a building which was the most, in a way, the content was the most technical ever. But it could so not be busy with the technical content because if it was too much believing in it, 5 years later, it was completely outdated. So, I mean, talking about without content, and I mean, I never imagined without content could be so present, so to speak. And then if you connect it with this without content, well, look, a lot has changed, but it's also true that when I was, like Enrique is unfortunately not here, but when I started studios in Columbia University, Architecture Without Content, then we were making houses and we were dreaming buildings without content, you know, and okay, you could pretend that a house had several rooms and it didn't matter whether, I mean, you know, would sleep in one and eat in another, which is obviously what happened and what we designed, but in a way it wasn't really very close to what was the teachings, which was in a way embracing these buildings which were so big that you should not, I mean, you should take them serious. I mean, that was basically the argument in the school at Columbia at the time, and then I moved it to Lausanne and to Mendrisio. So in a sense, I think the theory, if it's even a theory, the theory came long before the question came to our office. And yeah, I mean, of course, it wasn't that we, and then we all come, it's also funny, I was talking about that with Marcelo and Sebastian. I mean, I think our both offices, if I can make that claim, which is of course a preposterous claim, but I guess are probably the only survivors of Avalos and Herreros in one way or another. So, I mean, I think many ideas, I think, ultimately come even from their thinking. I mean, at the time, I think there was their total obsession with you know, nondescript boxes or buildings which were almost nothing. I mean, it's there, but I think in our office there was always a desire to make more architecture for these things than in their minds, you know, in a sense. So trying to find an equation between, you know, let's say satellites or media or even dead people, and at the same time doing an architecture which is to a certain extent totally ignorant to that. What I'm quite happy about is that I think now we can at least try it, we can test it. And the houses are nice, and that's also why I ended with a house. It isn't new. I mean, we are building it now, so there's still these things. But ultimately, I believe that, yeah, I think as an architect, and I know we have colleagues, some of them, I think, very people I respect a lot. I mean, I would say well-known architects, but who are very, very focused on a very specific genre of the exclusive object. And I personally don't believe architecture should be too busy with that. I think we have another more important social contribution to make. And of course, that means that we are much more dirty. You know, people would say, oh, yeah, you did that with the developer. And oh, that is, yeah, the plan. Oh, I'm not so sure if I like that plan. I think, yeah, sure. I mean, it's easier when I do that and I do two rectangles. It's a cleaner plan. But in a weird way, I find the way that artists puts his furniture in the room is not different from how people may put machines in the brewery, so to speak. I mean, and I make it too simplistic, but I find that fascinating. So I think architecture is ultimately much more about what you decide to design and control and what not. I think it's just that. And all the rest is totally unimportant. And then they have people who are more intelligent in what they're focused on than other people. But I mean, I think ultimately, so I think we learned a lot, but I learned especially that it's possible in a very big scale to do buildings. I believe that very much. And I think it's very exciting potentially where you design, say, 30-40%. And just not only 30-40%, because the rest you really do not design. You do not design. Not possible. That's okay. But then you have to choose well. I don't know. I don't know if it's an answer to your question. Is it?
Yes. No, I was thinking when you say we test it, and I like very much the moment when you say this look as madness, you know, when you were presenting the RTA, and I don't necessarily think that it rebukes or debates the architecture without content premises. I was just thinking how it expanded,
Yeah.
and which are the peaks it shows, and let's say it's interesting to see this last project because one could say different kinds of madness and different kinds of contents, some or different kinds of contents to be indifferent of some way in your terms. Like.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I would agree with that. Another question, or is everybody's really tired up?
I think we can call
One
it.
more question.
We can take one more. Manu, atrás tuyo.
Hello, Kirsten. Hello, everybody. I speak in Spanish because my English is
It's okay. Your
Dale,
English
no hay
is
problema.
good. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Sorry. En varias referencias de las obras que pasabas, encontré arquitectura ligada al clasicismo. Y bueno, en el libro que escribiste, Without Contents, tocas ese punto como parte de lo que forma la arquitectura que ustedes hacen. Quería preguntarte en particular qué es lo que te lleva siempre a buscar esa referencia, si es que es así, y por qué y para qué, sintéticamente. Nada, gracias y fue un placer escucharte.
Yeah. So if I understood well, you ask about references to classicism, right? Well, I mean, more than anything. Yeah. Yeah. Well, to be honest, I think there's an aspect of classicism in the references, but yeah, maybe if I would have, I think maybe 5 or 10 years ago, I would have been more, how to say, definitive in that. I think classicism now, and I mean, of course, it's also completely imprecise, but I think the classic, which I think we like, we somehow like, is, if I'm not sure if it's very clear, but is Roman. It's not so much the classic, but it's the Roman. It's this kind of a, I don't know, a kind of weird idea of scale and infrastructure or something, which is typical for Roman. There's a certain brutality also to Roman architecture. Which I've always, now we are this semester or this year we're working on Rome, and I find it very interesting that there's an idea of the classic which is not I would say refined aestheticism or something, because that does not take away, and I know there was a Schinkel here, but there was also there was also Baldassari or Rocher. I mean, so there's many things. I mean, of course I do like Schinkel, but even Schinkel in a sense is a very strange classicist, a very pragmatic classicist in a certain sense, who was also able to even do buildings in another style if it was supposed to be. So I think the classic is an important part of architectural culture, but not as a kind of final, how to say, dogmatic reference. I mean, yeah, sure. I think you also feel that today that it's also heavily contested to a certain extent, no? I mean, the classic is supposed to be white. I mean, it is also, in a sense, very colonial. I mean, there's many elements of the classic, which I think we should look at with a certain, healthy distance. Having said that, I mean, there's amazing aspects. I mean, and even I think in all its kind of ambivalences and confusion, I was referring already going with Sebastian to La Plata yesterday. I mean, I was very intrigued in driving into that extremely gridded map, which I saw on the Google Earth, so to speak. And it was even more interesting so that in the end you drive in there and it just totally disappears, you know what I mean? I think that's fantastic, and that you only look at the corner buildings, the Chamfort corner buildings. And I think the classic is interesting in that context. I think in its failure or its ambivalence or in what it tries to order and what it perhaps does order a little bit, but also what it allows in some sense. No, I mean, I remember, and we're back to Enrique, but I mean, in other conversations, he often would refer in relationship to our work, in a kind of geometrical correction. No? I mean that you introduce a very precise figure in some sense, not because you want to dominate the rest, but you're interested. I think look at the simple library I showed in the beginning of the lecture, and somehow all the other fragments of things they are put under pressure and they become something else. You know. But you can explain it from the classic, but you can also explain it from Baldassare. You know, it depends on what you want to use and who your audience is, also perhaps. Yeah.
Bueno, I think we can call it a night, a great night. Thank you, Kersten. Gracias.